You think credit's complicated, don't understand what the score is all about, don't understand how these lenders decide who has higher credit, who doesn't have higher credit, feels like it's magical to you. Well, then these are the 6 questions that I think, at least I would ask before I would give anybody money, and how they relate to your credit score. So hopefully after this video, it makes a little bit more sense why some people have higher scores than other people, and how maybe you could raise your score based upon these questions and your new understanding. Anyways, I'm Matt Coach. This YouTube channel is for me to share my tips, tricks, and mistakes on my way to building a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. Hope to share you guys all the tricks I've learned in order to gain funding and gain the skills necessary in order to do so. So, without further ado, let's get rolling. Hey everybody, this is Matt. I'm going to go over with y'all today are my patent pending 6 questions of credit. These are the 6 questions that I would ask, or I'd want to know the answers to before I would give somebody money, and essentially how these 6 questions relate to your actual credit score. So hopefully the mystery of credit becomes a little less of a mystery for you all after this little slideshow. All right, let's get it rolling. So I think probably your first question you're gonna ask somebody if they ask you to give them money is, will you pay me back, right? Now everyone's gonna probably say yes to this, so I'm not gonna do a whole deep dive on this question, but this is what your credit score is essentially, right? Your credit score is that number that essentially determines the likelihood that you'll pay somebody back, right? I think probably you guys understand it up to that point. But basically that's the question of credit score, is just, will you pay me back? So I'll move on to, obviously, if you want to make credit score better, what are the things you got to do? Well, that comes with these other 5 questions and the answers to them, right? So the next one you'd probably ask if somebody asked you for money is, how soon are you going to pay me back, right? So like if I have the analogy, Mark's going to be the borrower, Mark's going to be the guy who is asking you for money. Right. So if Mark borrows money from Tim, John, and Carl, right, and he tells them he's going to pay him back in a week, right, and Mark's asking you for money, right, at that point, you'd want to ask Tim, John, and Carl, did he pay you back in a week? How long did it take you to pay him back, right? If he paid all of them back in a week, you might think of Mark as maybe a cool guy to maybe lend $100 to or something like that, whatever is within your grasp. However, if Tim, John, Carl's like, hey man, he still owes me money, or it took him a few months or something like that, then Mark's probably not as trustworthy of a person to give money to. So that is the question that relates to payment history, which is the majority of your score, 35% of your total score. Sorry, not your majority, but the highest portion of your score, right? And I would think that that's pretty logical, right? Because probably the first thing that you're thinking after whether or not this person pays me back is whether they're going to pay you back, in a month or a year, or how it's going to go about after that. So that is your payment history. How do you make that better? You pay on time, right? So when you have a credit card or you have a loan, you're making sure that you make that payment during the statement date, right? So as soon as you're supposed to make that payment, you make that payment like you said you would. That's how you raise your payment history, right? So we'll move on to the next question. Probably after that, you're probably going to ask something along the lines of, how much debt are you in? Who else do you owe money to, right? So if Mark is in that same spot, right, and he still owes Tim, John, and Carl $100, right? He hasn't paid them back yet, and he's asking you for money. You might be in a spot where you don't want to lend him all that money. You don't know who he's going to pay back first. He's going to pay back Tim, John, Carl, or you, right? He owes all you guys money. But if instead Mark comes back and he's like, yeah, I've paid all them back, and Tim, John, and Carl are like, yeah, that dude paid me back for all that stuff. He doesn't owe me anything anymore. Now you're at a spot where you'd probably be a little more likely to give Mark some money, right? Rather than if you owed all of them, you'd probably be a little less likely to. So that is the debt owed portion of your credit score. So that's actually calculated based upon your revolving credit accounts. Revolving credit accounts are basically like your credit cards. things that you didn't get a fat lump sum for, things that change at different times come through. So like a auto loan or a mortgage loan where you got a lump sum of money is not factored into your debt owed portion of your credit score. So having $500,000 on your mortgage is not actually affecting this part. But for instance, having $10,000 on your credit card would affect this. So this is calculated based on a proportion of how much money you have available in revolving accounts. So if you have a $100,000 credit line and you owe $10,000, you have 10% debt owed, right? If you have a $10,000 credit limit and you owe $5,000, you have a 50% debt owed. So that person who has the $10,000 credit limit and owes $5,000 is actually going to have a worse credit score than the person who owes $10,000 but has a $100,000 limit. That's the way it's calculated. So by understanding that, you probably want to pay off all your debts and you want to have as high of a credit limit as possible so that that proportion stays as low as possible when you have to carry a balance. Next question, pretty quick, right? How long have you known the guy for? So if you met Mark last weekend and he asked you for $100, you're probably not sitting there in the same spot as if you knew Mark since the third grade, on whether or not you'd be willing to give him money, right? So if Mark's like your best friend and he's come through and he's really cool, he's the kind of guy who if you buy him around at the bar, he buys you one back. That might be a person who you'd be willing to give some money over to. Whereas if you just met Mark, he's a friend of a friend of a friend, and he's asking you for some money, you're probably not feeling as obligated to give them some money. So this is your length of credit history on your credit report, right? So essentially when you open up an account, that starts your relationship, that part. And what they do is they actually calculate the average of all of your accounts. So every time you open a brand new account, it lowers your length of credit history. So they're going to go from, hey, you opened your first credit card at hopefully 18, hopefully you had someone on you for that, and now you're 26, right? If that was the credit card that you have 8 years credit history. But if you had a credit card at 18 and then you got another one when you were 22, right? So you've had that one for 4 years and you had this one for 8 years, right? They're going to take the average and say your length of credit history is 6 years. So basically the way that you raise this is you have longer outstanding accounts. You don't open up a lot of new accounts, so that's what helps raise your credit score. So I can see a lot of people who are in their 50s and 60s have these higher credit scores naturally because, one, their credit limit goes up, answering that debt owed portion over time, and then they have this length of credit history portion of their credit that's also getting raised. I'm going to go into a little bit of further detail on a couple of these on how you guys can maybe do a little tips and tricks to raise these factors a little bit inorganically. Things that report to your credit report when you don't have something like length of credit history. How do I have an average of 7-8 years credit history as a 25-year-old when I've taken out 4 or 5 credit cards in the last 2 years? Well, there's some tips and tricks that come along with that. But I'll get that to you guys in another video in the future, so we're looking at that. That might be tomorrow. Maybe. Your next question is, who else have you asked for money, right? So it's probably the next important thing. If Mark asked you for money and you're calling around to all your guys' mutual friends and he's like, he asked me for money too. He's asking everybody for money, and some people have given him money, some people haven't given him money, but he's asking everybody. That's probably adding some risk to his factor, right? Because now you don't know who he's going to be paying back, how many other people he's asking, how many people have actually given him money. You don't know what situation he's really at, right? So, hopefully you'd hear like, hey, no, he hasn't asked me for anything. Mark's a super cool guy, and he's just asked you for money for whatever reason. That would be a better situation than if you called up everybody, all of you guys' mutual friends, and he's asked everybody for money, right? So this is the new credit portion of your credit score. So this is factored with soft and hard inquiries on your report. Soft inquiries don't actually affect your report. Hard inquiries do. Hard inquiries are when you actually do a full application for some kind of lending product. Typically, you get hard pulled before they give you anything. So that shows up to your credit report. They either pull TransUnion, Experian, Equifax, or some combination of the three. And you'll see if a bank pulls TransUnion, that your TransUnion score is going to come down a few points after they give you a hard inquiry. So that is the same thing as Mark asking other people for money, and you hear that they said, that he asked them for money. So you can think of that as the comparison between the two. Last question, just who else and how many people are telling me that you're good for the money? So, if you're in the same spot and, you ask around to all your guys' mutual friends and everyone tells you like, hey, Mark's always paid me back. Mark buys the next round every time I buy him around. He's a really good guy and he's just, down, needs a couple $100 or whatever. But he's totally good for it. If you hear that from, every single one of your guys' mutual friends come through, you're probably more likely to give him some money. Whereas, if you hear it from, say, just your guys' one other friend that he's probably good for it, or, maybe his wife or his mom, that, he's good for the money, that would be not as ideal, right? So the more people that say he's cool and good for the money, the better the situation. So this is your credit mix on your credit score. So your credit mix is that you actually have a combination of different loans on your credit report. So this is easy enough to kind of comprehend and understand, is that if you're paying off something like a mortgage and an auto loan and a personal loan and a home improvement loan, and you're paying off all your credit cards, the more things that you're paying on time and keeping reporting on your account, the higher your credit score is going to go. Right? So this is probably a general understanding. Like, a lot of people don't take out a lot of loans, so they can't build a credit score if you never take out any kind of money. But ideally, if you wanted to have that upper 800 score, upper echelon score, that you would have a mortgage on your account, you'd have an auto loan on your account, you'd have some personal loan on your account, and you would have about 4 or 5 different credit cards that you'd have on your account to hit up that 800 plus score. I actually don't have an auto loan or mortgage on my account, so that's keeping me from that little 800 brick, keeps me waving around that 790 mark or so. But that is essentially how you would maximize your credit scores, by having each of those different types of loans reporting to your account. And with that, hopefully those 6 questions were a little bit eye-opening for you guys. Hopefully that gave you some insight on why your credit score is what it is. I think that credit always seems like a bit of a mystery. It's never really taught, but at least these 6 questions for me help me to understand a little bit, put in perspective, why a lender might lend to somebody else over me, or, vice versa, what kind of things you can do to be better off and less risky looking for lenders. So anyways, thanks for watching. Get another one out to you guys tomorrow. Anyways, if this was interesting, if this helped you out at all, go ahead and share it to anybody else who, maybe doesn't know about credit, what it is. And, if you don't like it at all, send me a DM, send me any kind of criticisms, anything that I should be doing to maybe make this better or easier to understand for you guys. But, that's it all.